Hello, we're group 5. Our group member is Sara, Jaden, and Moala. So we're talking about noun clause first, and especially description, functions of noun clause, and types of noun clauses. So before we start talk about noun clause, I want to explain what is a clause. Clause is a combination of subject and verb. So it doesn't express complete thought and cannot stand alone as a sentence, and that is dependent clause. Yeah, so what is noun clause? Noun clause is dependent clause that function as a noun. So it is one type of clause, so it cannot be a sentence by itself. So it is noun clause always go with another independent clause, and noun clause can be a part of independent clause. Also, noun clause uses subordinators to connect with independent clause or begin noun clauses. There are a few types of noun clauses, and there are that clause and if whether clause and question clause such as what, who, which, and there are more clauses such as where, whom, whose, when, how, why, and whenever or wherever. So I want to specially talk about that clause. That clause can omit that can be omitted if the meaning is clear without it. But never omit that clause when it is the first word in a sentence. So I want to give you an example about that clause. So everyone knows that the word is round. So in the sentence, that clause is not start the sentence. So it means that we can omit it if meaning of sentence is not gonna change. So in this sentence, everyone knows that the word is round. So even if we don't have any that clause, its meaning is not changed. So we can omit it, like everyone knows the word is round. And yeah, so we can omit that clause, that reason. And noun clause is function as noun, but also it can be function as object of preposition and complement. So punctuation of noun clause is common never used to separate noun clauses. So now we're gonna talking about functions of noun clauses.
So now we can more look into the functions of the noun clause. As we can see now, noun clause functions as a subject, object of preposition, complement, and adjective complement. And in a sentence, we choose a sentence saying what she wore at the party really turned some heads. So for the first sentence, we can first identify the dependent clause, which are what she wore at the party is the dependent clause, and the verb of this sentence is torn, and some heads can be object. So as we can see now, the dependent clause begin with what become a subject of the clause of the sentence, and dependent clause also contains with subject and verb, like Jaden said, and so this whole dependent clause role is the subject of this independent clause. So the dependent clause is in the independent clause in this case. Now let's look into the object clause. How noun clause functions as an object. The student wants to know if the test is easy. Let's find dependent clause, which is if the test is easy. And who is doing the action is the student. It's the independent clause subject. And want to know is verb. Student wants to know what? It's definitely object of this sentence. And then if we see it, and this sentence, this independent clause functions as an object of this whole independent clause. And now we know it's the noun clause functions as an object in this case. And let's move on to the object of preposition. Sara should not be held responsible for what her brother does. The dependent clause is here, what her brother does. And then subject of this independent clause is Sara shouldn't be held is the verb, and responsible is actually object. And so we see here is a preposition, and the dependent clause that comes after for, which is a preposition, and then it functions as an object of the preposition. So this dependent clause functions of this object of the preposition. Okay, now let's move to the complement. The problem is that I cannot see without my glasses. And the dependent clause is here, that I cannot see without my glasses. And then subject of this independent clause is the problem, and the verb is here. And the dependent clause that comes after is, which is a be verb, is a complement. And now we can see that this clause functions as a complement in this case. And then last one, we wanted to talk about adjective complement. I am happy that you decided to come. That you decided to come is a dependent clause, which is a noun clause. But I put the that in the bracket because this that can be omitted. And if we see this one, like I is a subject, am is a verb, and happy is the actually object. And without this dependent clause, I am happy is complete and I can understand. But we wanted to add more reason why I'm happy. We are using the dependent clause, giving more information. Giving more information why I'm happy. So these are the examples, examples of how noun clause functions in a sentence.
Before I move on, I would like to clarify that happy is an adjective. Type of noun clauses. There's a three type of noun clauses: the that clauses, if whether clauses, and question clauses. I will start with that clauses. That clauses emphasize in subjunctive noun clauses and sentence begin with it. That clauses are the dependent noun clauses that begin with a that. For example, that I love you is certain. That in that sentence is a subject. Another example for that clauses: you know that I love you is an object as a noun clauses. But at the same time, in that sentence, that you can omit it because it does have a meaning clearly. And this is how it will sound like. You know I love you. That's how you omit that clauses. The next clauses is if or whether clauses. If or whether clauses is a dependent noun clauses that begins with a subordinator if or what or whatever, wherever, whether. Whether is more formal than if. For example, whether he is sick or not is uncertain. Whether in that sentence as a noun clauses is a subject. I don't know if he loves me. If in that sentence is a noun clauses, but it also is an object. The last example for whether or if clauses, Tom is afraid of whether he will get fired. Whether is a noun clause in that sentence is an object or preposition. Using if the noun clauses is in a sentence cannot be an object or preposition. The last type of noun clauses is question clauses. Question clauses is also a dependent clauses that begin with a subordinate such as who, what, where, when, or how. For example, for question clauses, first one, what you want is important to me. What as a noun clauses in that sentence is a subject. The second example for question clauses is I don't know who loves me. Who in that sentence is an object. The last example for question clauses is it all depends on how you handle that problem. How, as in question clauses, is an object of preposition.
Now we are going to talk about subjunctive noun clause. After certain verbs and adjectives in independent clauses, you must use subjunctive form of the verb in the noun clause that follows. The subjunctive form of a verb is the same as the base form. Also, we wrote down some other examples of those certain verbs and adjectives. So those are advise, insist, ask, command, suggest, prefer, propose, urge, necessary, vital, mandatory, urgent, essential. In order to understand more clearly about subjunctive noun clause, we also prepared to explain two sentences. The first sentence is this one. Mom will insist that you study. Oh, I forgot the period here. Mom insists that you study. So that you study is the dependent clause of this sentence. And use as subject of the dependent clause, and study is the verb of the dependent clause. And insist is the certain verb that we have in our list. And after, if there is an insist, and right after dependent clause that follows insist, the verb has to have the base form, which is here as study. And the second sentence, it is necessary that each salesperson work longer hours. That each salesperson work longer hours is a dependent clause. Each salesperson is a subject and work is a verb. And necessary is the certain adjectives that we have in this independent clause. And like we said, if there is the necessary, the verb of the dependent clause has to have the base form, which is clearly shows here as work. Yeah, and this is all about subjunctive noun clause.
Right now we're going to talk about adjective clause. Adjective clause is an independent clauses that function as an adjective. modify a noun and a pronoun. It is a way to improve our writing because adjective clauses use subordinated to connect ideas rather than pronoun. It always used after antecedent. For example, scientists who study fossils are called paleontology. Paleontology. Scientist is the antecedent, and the adjective clause always comes after the antecedent, which is who study fossils. Antecedent, the noun, it's a noun phrase, and is referred to whatever noun or pronoun an adjective clause modify. It is either restrictive or non-restrictive. Restrictive clauses identify the antecedent. It does not have a comma or use comma. Non-restrictive clauses, it is not necessary to identify it antecedent. It just given the extra information about it. You can omit it without lose the meaning of the sentence. A relative pronoun and adverb. Adjective clauses start or begin with a relative pronoun or relative adverb. For example, the relative pronoun that is used in the restrictive clauses only, and which is a relative pronoun that used in the non-restrictive clauses. These are the relative pronouns: who, whom, and whose refer to people, and which, whose, and that refer to things or animals.
So now I'm going to talk about how adjective clauses functions in the sentence. So first, there's adjective clause, pronoun used as subject. It means that function as adjective. So I bring some examples that help to understand the function of adjective clauses. So first, I thank the woman who helped me. So in the sentence, from start, who helped me is adjective clause. So this who means that whom. So this who helped me support woman. So we can say that this is a subject adjective clause that function as subject. So another examples, the boy who and that won the race is happy. So start from who won the race is happy, support the boy. So this adjective clause function as subject, right? And number two, there's adjective clause pronouns used as the objective. So I also bring one more examples. So the man whom that I saw was dead. So from start, whom I saw was dead. This is adjective clause, and in the adjective clause they have one more subject in here. So and also there's one more subject. So two subjects means that this adjective clause is the object of the sentence. And number three, there's adjective clause pronouns used as the objective of preposition. So example, he is the man about whom I told you. So in the sentence, start about whom I told you is the adjective clause. So this whom support about preposition of the object. See about this preposition. So this adjective clause is always have to be with preposition in this case. And now I'm going to talk about punctuation about adjective clause. So there's three punctuation of the adjective clause, and first is do not use comma for restrictive clause. And second, use commas for non-restrictive clause. And yeah, and if you use commas, we cannot use that and use that clause and omit object pronoun.
Now we would love to talk about some other cases how we can use the adjective clause in a sentence. The first one is the possessive adjective clause. In this case, whose is a relative pronoun which can replace a possessive word in a sentence. The first example, I know the man whose bicycle was stolen. In this case, the whose is a relative pronoun who relates with the man, and whose bicycle was the dependent word clause. And the second example, the student whose composition I read writes well. And for in this case, whose composition I read is a dependent clause beginning with the whose, and this whose relates with the student. And the other case to using an adjective clause in a sentence is adjective clause of place. The first example, Jerry went to the same store where Jennifer bought her coat. Where Jennifer bought her coat is a dependent clause starting with the where relative pronoun, and Jerry went to the store. So this is the antecedent that explains the antecedent of the dependent clause. And since we are talking about the place, store, we are using a where instead of that. So there's some, we still can use that, but it's not quite quite easy to like go the fluid or so. For in this case, it is identifying the noun, so we don't use a comma here. And the second sentence, Frank went to study in Boston, where some of the world's best universities are based. Where some of the world's best universities are based is the dependent clause relating with the Boston. So the Boston is the place that we all know, and then it's modifying this noun. So that that's why we use the comma here. And the second one, adjective clause of time. The first sentence, May 24, 1994 was the day when I was born. It's definitely a dependent clause. And then there is a specific day, so that's why we use the relative pronoun as when, and we don't use the comma here. And the second sentence, on November 9th, 1999, when the wall was torn down, their lives changed again. When the wall was torn down is the dependent clause, and we know what the date is, so that's why we are using a comma. We already know the day. And the last part is reducing an adjective clause. So if it's an object clause, object relative clause, we just omit the relative pronoun. If it's a subject one, there's two different cases. And the first case, if there is a be verb, so you can omit the marker and use omit the marker and the be verb, and so verb is gonna be similar. And the second case is if there is just a verb, not the be verb, so the marker will be omitted and then the verb getting adding ing. So this is how we use it.
Okay, now there's few things that we have to remember about noun clause and adjective clause. First, noun clause function as noun and also object and object of prepositions and complement. And second, adjective clause always have antecedent. It is modifies and identifies noun, identify noun. So antecedent, it always have to be noun, and after antecedent you can use adjective clause. But how to compare this to noun clause and adjective clause? It is about like when you look some sentences and after you can find, if you can find antecedent, it will definitely adjective clause.
As an example to elaborate on what he just explained, to compare noun clause from adjective clause, the first example is noun clause. I am not sure who came first. Who came first is a dependent clause, functioning as an object. The second example is I know the student who came first is an adjective clause, which who came first is an adjective clause, refer to the subject, the student. Like he says that antecedents come after adjective clause. Noun clause. Another example for noun clause. I don't know where he went. Where he went is the noun clause, which is an dependent clause function as an object. The last example is an example for adjective clause. Later, I will show you pictures of the town where I am from. Where I am from is the adjective clause, refer to the subject, which is the noun or the antecedent, which means antecedent always come first before the adjective clause.
Yeah. So as her examples, whether or not existence of antecedent is make decision about adjective clause and noun clauses. So, and also adjective clause never used as complement, but otherwise noun clause are able to use as complement. So this is the two differences between noun clause and adjective clause.
Thank you so much for watching our video so far. And now in this video we tried to explain about what the noun clause and what the adjective clause and how we can distinguish between the clauses. And now we would love to give some tips for you to identify any of the clauses in the sentence. Like, remember the ideal structure, which is subject plus verb and object. And when you know about the subject of the sentence and the verb of the sentence and then object of the sentence, it makes more easy. It makes for you very easy to identify what clause is. Like we've been talking about object of the noun clause. Noun clause functions as a noun and the object and our object of proposition. As you know what is a noun, an object, and then the verb, it's more easier for you. And the another tip that we wanted to give you is first identify the verb of the tense. So that's the first step for you to understand that sentence and even identifying which clauses that the sentence contains. And once you identify the verb, it's more easier for you to find out the subject and find out the object that relates with that verb. So overall, so this is how we prepared our noun and adjective clauses. And thank you so much for watching, and we hope you have a great day. Adjective clause.